countdown. 3, 2, 1. And we are live. What's up, everybody? I'm streaming here from the new streaming rig. I've hopefully got some pretty good quality going on today. Super excited to be back on the live streams, and we're here to talk about maybe something unexpected for some of the audience here. We talk a lot about nutrition, we talk a lot about food, we talk a lot about other aspects of health, but something that I think a lot of people miss is one of the most important nutrients that our body requires, and that's light. So I'm here with Scott from Juve. We did a podcast about a year ago, maybe even more than a year ago, and he's coming back on. Juve has been expanding rapidly. So, Scott, welcome to the show. How are you doing today, my friend?
Good to be back, Tristan. Always nice to chat with you, and excited to dig into a little bit more about light and its impact on our overall health, man.
Yeah. So let me just start out by saying your products have really improved in quality, man. The Juve Mini that I recently got, I got the Juve, or no, I'm sorry, the Juve Go. It's the
Yeah.
Juve Go Red. This thing, I've been loving this, man. The It's my nightlight. I use it for reading before I go to
Yeah.
sleep, and it's just really fantastic. It's passed the drop test. It's passed the test of my 2.5-year-old molesting it constantly. The kids like playing with it too. But good job on the quality upgrade on the Juve. Really appreciate everything you guys have been doing. Let me preface this whole thing by saying that something I noticed early on in my journey to try to take my health back and figure out why I always felt so sick was asthmatic, allergic to everything, constantly just in this immune flight or fight mode. Lots of anxiety, even some intense depression at times in my life. What I noticed when I was about 18, 19 years old was that if I got in the sun and laid out as naked as I could under the sun, my mood, my immune system, my general sense of well being would improve dramatically. So, light was kind of early on a big part of my journey of trying to figure out what the heck is going on here with this body and trying to get my health back. Um, what the heck is going on with the red and near infrared frequencies of light, Scott? And for the new viewers, let's kind of maybe start from the beginning. How did you get into all this madness?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you bring up that story about you growing up and sort of the power that natural sunlight had in your life. That was the same actually for me. And it's interesting to kind of be in this light therapy space now, because when I remember back to my teenage years, I grew up in the Midwest part of the United States. Not a lot of natural sunlight, maybe out 3 or 4 months out of the year. But I had acne issues when growing up during my teenage years. But every time I, like, whether it was the summer or maybe I got in the tanning bed, there, like, within a matter of like days, maybe a few weeks, like most of those acne related issues, like totally resolved. And I didn't really think anything of it then at the time. But now, looking back and kind of re-examining that period of life, it's like, wow, that's the power of natural light. It can do some pretty amazing things, not just for skin health, but for a wide variety of issues, everything from muscle recovery to cognitive function to enhanced athletic performance to better optimized sleep, et cetera. So light is kind of one of those underappreciated aspects of kind of an overall healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
Um, oh, go ahead.
No, keep going, man. You're on a roll there. I thought you paused like you were done. Go ahead, my friend.
No, no, no. Well, I was just gonna say, like, how I, I'm sure that there's probably some new listeners that have come on the Primal Edge train, over the past year since we last chatted. But and we can certainly get into kind of how light therapy works at a cellular level. But how I personally got into it's kind of an interesting story. Back in 2015, early 2015, my sister-in-law bought a red, I'm using air quotes here for anyone listening and not watching, but she bought a red light therapy package at a local spa in Minneapolis. That's where we lived at the time, and saw really good results, especially with skin related issues like eczema and some stretch marks due to multiple pregnancies. And so she convinced my wife to do the same. My wife went to this spa on a consistent basis over the course of about 8 to 10 weeks. When I say consistent basis, like 4 to 5 times a week. And my wife saw really good results too, with some age spots, again, reduced stretch marks. We've got 4 kids ourselves. So they were pretty stoked about the therapy. I thought it was completely woo woo. I was very cynical at the time. I was at Medtronic, so yeah, I've always been a conservative kind of traditional medical device space, and so I was very cynical. But excuse me. Long story short, they didn't want to go to a commercial facility or a spa on that regular of a basis just because of the budget, and it wasn't very convenient. And so my sister-in-law convinced her husband Justin, who's an engineer, to experiment with some prototypes that they could use at home, right? More convenient, easier to access. The whole family could benefit from the therapy, et cetera. So he sort of got to town on that. And then we started kind of meeting on a weekly basis and like talking a little bit more about this because I started digging into the science. I went straight to the kind of the published peer-reviewed research, totally skeptical at the time, but then it was quickly blown away by the sheer amount of published scientific research, peer-reviewed published scientific research on the benefits of light therapy. And in the world of academia, it's referred to as photobiomodulation. So I was blown away, and sort of that combination of Justin, who's the engineer, building some initial prototypes. I was looking at the clinical data and kind of like, well, what products are available? And we came to the conclusion that most everything on the market was like small little handheld devices that were really underpowered. And we had no intention of building a business at the time, but it was like, well, this is interesting. I mean, a therapy that's supported by a ton of science, not really well understood or well known, and there appeared to be a gap kind of in the marketplace in terms of offerings for the layperson to use in their own home, which is quite honestly where light therapy probably should be used most of the time. It's just more convenient that way. And so anyway, we kind of got to work, slowly started kind of building out some additional prototypes, ended up launching our first product in early 2016, and then it's been kind of a wild ride ever since.
So you mentioned digging into some of the research and being kind of blown away that there even was research on this. I think this is something that many people have never even considered, that light could be used medicinally. And by people never, I mean in modern times, because we know about things like solariums, people treating tuberculosis with sunlight in the Swiss Alps. I forget what the doctor's name was. We also know, everybody knows about vitamin D, how important vitamin D is. But what kind of research was out there that goes beyond just the standard, well, vitamin D is, sulfated cholesterol turns to vitamin D when our skin is exposed to sun. What type of stuff is out there about red light, and what type of research was it that you first came upon when you looked at this? Because I know it's expanding. This field is really blowing up. What is some of the mind-blowing research you found?
Yeah, so I first started on PubMed, and I quickly learned that like there's not just kind of a handful of studies. There is like a laundry list, and you know, fast forward 3 years, and there's over 5,000 peer-reviewed, published either studies, manuscripts, or meta-analysis that have been that are readily available online. So I first started there and was kind of quickly blown away. But then I sort of like went back. I tried to do a little bit more research beyond that in order to find out like what is the history of this therapy. How long is it? Has it been around that long? Like who are kind of the academic thought leaders in the space, et cetera. And there's some pretty obscure books that you can find, whether it's on Amazon or a lot of times you have to go kind of beyond that. And this therapy, it was sort of harken back to 200 years ago, 100 to 200 years ago, was referred to as Helio Therapy, and it was quite common for patients in hospitals to be wheeled out, on their beds to be exposed to natural sunlight for the healing benefits. And so it does date back to quite some time. But then in the mid 20th century, there was a fair amount of excuse me, I'm overcoming a bug on my chest, so I've got these periodic coughs. But kind of going back to kind of the mid 20th century, the lasers began to be researched for the purposes of low level lasers, specifically wavelengths in the mid 600 nanometer range, to a visible red light, and then also in the mid 800 nanometer range, which is near infrared light. So not
So
far
just
or
for
mid.
the audience, that's if you search LLLT, that's what low level laser therapy is the acronym there, and there's a lot of studies on that, right?
Tons. Yep. And it kind of, most of that research sort of dates back to, the mid 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, et cetera. But then fast forward to the 1990s, and that's when a lot of times you'll see NASA kind of associated with red light therapy, and they actually funded through grants some of the initial research for LED based light therapy. So they at first wanted to study plant growth in space for astronauts, but then quickly realized that actually astronauts benefited from this therapy while in space as well. And so they began to fund more research related to LED based light therapy. And since then, there's just been a plethora of research with respect to both lasers and now, high powered LEDs, because with as LED technology has advanced, you can deliver the same kind of power as a laser, but over a much broader sort of surface or coverage area. And so there's a lot of benefits to LEDs. Plus, they're a lot less expensive than a high powered laser. And so yeah, I mean, specific to research, it kind of most of it sort of in this in the world of specifically photobiomodulation kind of starts in the mid 20th century, but now it's really sort of it's really excelled, especially over the past 5 to 10 years. Yeah, and a lot of the time, LED based devices are being used now.
And what are some of the I was going to say symptoms, but maybe not even symptoms. What are some of the things, ailments, and issues that people or that the studies have shown red light therapy is effective for? I know, and we've talked about. I'll let you expand on it because you know so much more about this.
Well, it's certainly expanding, but I would say probably the three or four core areas. I'm gonna take a cough here, just 1 second. Right.
We got a lot of our live audience is pretty funny. They're like, why can't the light cure his cough?
It's funny, right? Here's this guy talking about light. He's in the natural light, and he's got this massive like cough on his chest. That's funny.
It happens, man.
It's like this bug that's been. We've got 4 kids, and so anyone that has kids kind of knows how that works. It's like it circulates through the entire family. Like when one kid gets it, but it's funny when I start talking and then breathing. It's like
That tickle, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's like a tickle. So I'll try to be. I'll try not to annoy the listeners
Yeah,
too
no,
much.
my listeners, they demand absolutely perfect health at all times. If you ever have been sick, then it's like your diet must be wrong, or it's not working, or I'm sure they'll diagnose both of us. I mean, I'm bald as can be right now, so
Yeah,
obviously things aren't working for me either. But we'll see if we can
yeah.
complete this without too much audience critique. You punks in the audience.
I'll welcome it. Feel free to kind of blast me for not overcoming this cough sooner. But um, here we go again. I'll welcome the critiques now, since the coughing is sort of is coming front and center here. But in regards to the benefits, it's super wide ranging. I think there's some interesting sort of burgeoning areas that we can certainly talk about in more detail. But a lot of the kind of the core buckets, if you will, come down to skin health. And skin health is kind of a broad arena. But when I say skin health, I mean reduced wrinkles, increased collagen levels, so kind of that full feeling in your face, reduced age spots, reduced eczema issues, etc. So skin health is there's a lot of data and a lot of science to support skin health. Joint pain and inflammation is another large bucket. So whether it's joint pain related to arthritis or osteoarthritis or just inflammation in general, there's a lot of scientific evidence to support the reduction of pain and inflammation. Muscle recovery and athletic performance, tons and tons of published peer-reviewed studies to support that bucket. That's pretty straightforward. It helps you recover faster, but it also helps you perform better for whether it's just kind of you're a weekend warrior, kind of training, or for elite athletes. So that's another bucket. But then there's kind of this sort of these sort of burgeoning areas like sleep, as an example. Not as much clinical data, but the research thus far is pretty impressive for optimizing sleep, helping your body produce more natural melatonin. Weight loss, ironically enough, there's some really, really well-structured, randomized, placebo-controlled studies that speak to red light therapy and weight loss. Cognitive function, I wouldn't say that's necessarily burgeoning. There's already a plethora of scientific studies to support enhanced cognitive function, whether it's symptoms of depression or just kind of when we think of cognitive function, whether, kind of things like better memory, better reaction times, etc. There's a ton of scientific evidence to support the healing or restorative properties of red light therapy for oncology patients that are on chemo or radiation. I mean, I could keep going on and on and on, but the benefits are so wide ranging, primarily because of the core mechanism of action of red and near infrared light and its ability to stimulate our mitochondria, or the mitochondria in our cells, to produce more ATP energy. There's some other mechanisms at play, but that core kind of mechanism of action is why you see this like laundry list of benefits with respect to red and near infrared light.
So, what are some of the mechanisms? Like you mentioned mitochondrial function, right? Um, how might this be
Mhm.
affecting mitochondria? Are you there? We got a little freezing, poor connection on Skype.
Yep.
Okay. Some
Oh,
Skype's. Yeah, you're back.
am I
We
back?
got plenty of bandwidth here, but we just get a poor connection sometimes on Skype. Um, so, what are some of the mechanisms that will be going on here? So you mentioned mitochondrial function, mitochondrial dysfunction being related to metabolic disorders. Everything from diabetes to cancer being linked to mitochondrial dysfunction. How is light affecting mitochondria?
Yeah. So there's some. I think fundamentally, if you talk to any of the leading researchers, photomedicine or photobiomodulation researchers, I think they'll all kind of agree upon the fact that it's apparent that these specific wavelengths have a particular affinity to an enzyme during the fourth phase of cellular respiration called cytochrome C oxidase. And by exciting cytochrome C oxidase, you allow more efficient energy production during the fourth phase of cellular respiration. That's fairly high level, but there's a lot of different things that we still don't know. We kind of most photo. When I say us, I'm kind of looping myself into that group of researchers. I'm certainly not a photomedicine researcher. We have a scientific board of advisors that kind of helps us out with that. But that's sort of the core thing at play. But also there's this element of when we stimulate our mitochondria, it does produce some reactive oxygen species. And so if we have healthy cellular function and that sort of acute release of reactive oxygen species allows our cells to actually produce some anti-inflammatory enzymes
Hmm.
that are healthy, right? So you get sort of a natural, like healthy immune response as well. And then for those that do not have healthy cellular function, it actually upregulates your cell's ability to produce reactive oxygen species as well. So it kind of works both ways, where you either have healthy or kind of mitochondrial dysfunction. So there's a little bit of hormesis at play. And then some of the more interesting research with regards to mechanism of actions, or the mechanism of action of red and near infrared light, is really some researchers out of Australia actually have studied um, red and near infrared light. Actually, it's a mammalian study, so it's not in humans, but they discovered that exposing these mammals to full body light therapy actually produced more healthy gut microbiome, which is really counterintuitive because theoretically light shouldn't penetrate as deep into our guts. And so they proposed actually a more metabolic kind of systemic metabolic mechanism of action for red and near infrared light. So at the end of the day, there's this core kind of mechanism where these wavelengths stimulate our cells to produce more energy, but there's also these ancillary mechanisms too that aren't as well understood.
Yeah, something that I've noticed, and what's crazy is, I mean, I live in Ecuador. We get plenty of sunlight year round, right? We have full spectrum sunlight available year round. We're here on the equator. We get a rainy season. It's about 6 months where there's off and on cloudiness, but it's pretty crazy how powerful it is, even for somebody who gets a lot of sunlight. I mean, I noticed you mentioned increased melatonin production. That's why I use it at night, right? I noticed that my sleep improves dramatically. If I lay under it and start reading, I'm gonna fall asleep within 15 minutes.
Mhm.
Whereas, I mean, we're exposed to so much unnatural light, so much artificial blue and white light, and those blue frequencies of light, as we all know, they stop melatonin production. So I've found incredible benefits for that. But you also mentioned the gut microbiome. Notice digestion effects as well. Definitely
Mhm.
tends to or tends to affect systemically the whole body. And if I'm not mistaken, doesn't the near infrared penetrate like 5 centimeters deep through the?
Yeah, near infrared light can penetrate. definitely a lot deeper than red light. It can actually penetrate through bone. Keep in mind that a lot of the energy is lost as it penetrates deep into the body. So you have to be using kind of a high powered device to actually have deeper tissues absorb a relevant dose of energy. But to your point, Tristan, I think it's really interesting that you bring up kind of blue light, especially during different parts of the day, because I think everyone listening, or that will be listening to this in the future, understands that the concept of when we consume different macronutrients, it makes a difference what time of the day we consume those. As an example, if you consume a lot of carbohydrates or high glycemic carbohydrates late at night, you don't want that insulin response, right? Your body's going to naturally produce more insulin as a response to those high glycemic foods. It's if you understand that at a high level, it's pretty similar with light. So if you're exposing yourself to a lot of artificial blue light, especially in the evenings, that your circadian rhythm is disrupted. Your body actually thinks it's the
Yeah,
morning,
you make
or
cortisol instead of melatonin. You're going to produce
yeah,
cortisol, and
exactly.
of course, cortisol is not bad. Like a lot of people freak out, oh, cortisol is bad. Cortisol is necessary. Inflammation in the body is necessary, but it's when it's chronic runaway inflammation at the wrong time for the wrong reason, then we run into negative things. So I mean, the constant exposure to blue light is terrible for our body. In fact, have you read? And we talked a little bit about this last time. Have you read Dr. Robert O. Becker's work? Uh,
Some of it.
okay.
Some of it. Yeah. Yep. I'm familiar with some of
Really
it. Yep.
interesting connection there. Now,
Yeah.
the body electric is his book. And when you connect the body electric to the principles that were kind of laid out by Gerald Pollack in the fourth phase of water, you kind of get this possible mechanism that could be happening or very likely is happening in the body where certain frequencies of light will enable water to hold an electrical charge better. And of course, our blood being mostly water, also a lot of magnetic heme iron. So you've got this magnetic fluid, this living liquid magnetic fluid that's responsive to light flowing through our whole body. And when we're exposed to the right frequencies at the right time, it would make sense that it would energize our body. And when you see his work, not Gerald Pollack, Dr. Robert O. Becker's work on regeneration in animals using electrical stimulation in salamanders and then even in rats, partially regenerating a rat's limb with, much like a lizard or a salamander does, using electrical current. And you combine that with when water is exposed to certain frequencies of light in the red range, it helps to charge separate the water, thus allowing more electrical current. So I know it sounds kind of crazy to some people out there, but this is a really interesting possible mechanism that I think guys like I've talked to Jack Kruse before, and while I don't agree with him on everything, he does make some interesting points concerning the importance of light. So if you guys want to look back on the episodes with Jack Kruse, there are some nuggets in
Yep.
there. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
You bring up some interesting concepts, and on the same topic of mechanism of action, I'm not sure if you've looked into Dr. Laszlo Boris's work in the Center for Deuterium Depletion in UCLA at
Yes,
all.
and
But
this is
but
something I need to get more into. That's going to be the next step on the streams is getting deep into the
it,
deuterium.
it's super interesting, and for those listening that aren't familiar with his work, he's a tenured professor at UCLA in the Department of Immunology, I believe. Has published well over 100 peer-reviewed pieces, all open access. So basically what that means is you don't have to pay to read the entire manuscript, which is really cool. That's something actually that he paid for, so everyone can read his work, which I think is cool. But his theory or his belief is that red and near-infrared light actually resonate with hydrogen, helping to change the viscosity of metabolic water inside our mitochondria, which in essence helps the nanomotors during the that are part of the electron transport chain spin faster. So in essence, it's picture your engine, right? And it just helps it helps your engine just function in a more efficient way. And so that's his theory, which actually kind of segues into this concept that red light is very synergistic with deuterium depletion because your cells can actually deplete heavy hydrogen or deuterium in a much faster way by introducing more, healthy wavelengths of light, being red and near infrared wavelengths.
Wow. All right. So that's fascinating. Yeah, we're gonna have to. I'm sure the audience is gonna be amazed by that. Some of them might just be like, "What the hell are you talking about? This is crazy." But we've got some uber nerds in there too, who like me are
I think they
really,
dig it, man.
yeah.
Yeah, I think they dig it. Whether it's a conversation with Dr. Q Collins, who's with that same group, or Dr. Boros,
Okay.
great guys, and it's just really interesting stuff. You know what I mean? I certainly don't pretend to know a ton about it, but super interesting, and I think we'll continue to learn a little more and more about like the role of deuterium in our health, just like light, etc.
Yeah, so the deuterium depletion is really, really cool. And, what we've been talking about a lot lately, carnivore diet. I'm sure you've seen the internet blown up
Yeah.
with the carnivore diet. We got guys like Dr. Sean Baker kind of paving the way for people to realize, hey, we know that low carbohydrate diets are not dangerous, and perhaps the plants in general are not necessary, and maybe in some people, they could even be detrimental in doing the opposite of what we think they're doing. So I think this is a fascinating angle. The deuterium depletion, the deuterium depleted water that a lot of people are getting into as well. This stuff it's very nuanced too. So I think anybody just diving into it, you got to understand there are nuances to it. And I've heard some stories of people going on deuterium depletion protocols and getting the opposite results that they considered they should be getting. So there's a lot going on here, and I'm so excited to learn more about this. Thanks for getting into that stuff. Now, so we've gotten into some of the mechanisms. We talked about some of the nitty gritty nerdy stuff. What about just like practical application? I mentioned it helps me sleep. I use the Juve Go. I really like the Juve Go. I use the Juve Go. This thing, I mean, look at it's. You know what? On this one, I got there's the fan. When it starts out, there it goes, and it gets quiet after that. It starts out a little
Oh,
bit
that's
loud.
interesting.
Yeah, I think it's because my son dropped it pretty hard, and it might have thrown the fan off a little bit. But you guys can see how bright this thing is.
Dude,
Um,
it's like an AMG engine, man. It wants to give you a little like a roar at the beginning when you turn it
yeah,
on.
yeah, yeah. It's got to put a new carburetor on that, quiet it down
That's
before I get it inspected at the DMV. Yeah. Um, so what are some of the other applications that this has? You mentioned muscle recovery, and that's something else I use it for too. Is like after a workout, I find that if my muscle is sore, you can really feel it kind of loosening it up almost. You can really feel it warming it. Yeah. What are people using this for, man?
Yeah, yeah. So I think I would probably separate it into two things, and I don't want to like make this a product pitch by no means, but I think most red light therapy devices kind of fall into these sort of two sort of buckets, if you will. One is like therapy, receiving a therapeutic dose of energy, right? So that's like taking, I think I'm not sure if you've got a quad or a duo there at the, at your place in Ecuador, but in essence, a full body system standing pretty close to it, right? With, 3 to 6 inches away from
I've
the
got
from the
I've got the
system.
Duo. So let me just show the audience here. Um, let's see. Where is my video? Okay. There's the Juve Duo
Oh, there you go.
right
Yep.
there. So I've got
And I
a
know you've got a nice video on it as well that like is kind of explains sort of the unboxing process and like
yes.
how you personally use it, which is great for anyone who wants to like, learn a little bit more
Which
about.
that link is in the description. I think it might be the first link in the description down below if you guys want to see that video and learn a little bit more about this stuff. If you, I know some people tune in and out during the live, so click that link, check it out.
Yep. So yeah, just to get back to your question, it's I think there's like this concept of using like a full body system. It doesn't necessarily have to be full body, but a full body system to receive like a therapeutic dose of energy in a relatively short amount of time, right? So with like the Duo, if you're standing, 3 to 6 inches from the system, within a about a 10-minute period, you'll receive a very clinically relevant dose of energy across that sort of that treatment or that coverage area. So that's one concept. The other concept is more it's not necessarily therapeutic per se. It is to a certain extent, but it's more using something like the Go or the Mini device to illuminate your room, like at night, as an example. That's something that like my wife and I do quite a bit. Is like when after the sun is set, we don't flip on like bright artificial lights at night. We'll turn on a Juve and use the healthy wavelengths of light, red and near infrared light. To actually we use it for kind of more illumination purposes to almost counteract
Mm-hmm.
kind of a blue light exposure, and that sort of that there's definitely a calming effect. So you're not necessarily receiving a clinically dose. It's more like by exposing your eyes to those specific wavelengths of light, it almost mimics the natural sunset
Yeah,
as
you know
well.
what? And
It
I
helps the
noticed
body
like
prepare for sleep.
firelight also feels really, therapeutic at night. It almost feels like that, I mean, you can't
Yeah.
ever you can't mimic the sun. You can't fully mimic natural fire. But I mean, it gives you this really nice, it's just so soothing. And this one that's just red, which the red one doesn't penetrate as deeply as the near infrared. I love reading with this at night. So I'll lay on my bed, I'll plop this thing on its side, and it'll be like above my head, and it really helps me sleep. I fall asleep within a few minutes, and then it turns off automatically after 20 minutes. So I fall asleep, it turns off, and I'm good. It's my little
There you go.
nightlight.
Yep. So yeah, there's kind of two different ways to use it, sort of like therapeutically, or sort of like this concept of using it to illuminate a room, or for that kind of that soft, sort of warmer ambient light to help prepare your body for sleep. So um, that those are two great ways to use the device, and using it therapeutically, it kind of depends on what you're trying to use it for. If it's proactive health, doing a 10-minute treatment with our devices is sufficient. If you're trying to recover from a surgery or an injury, like you may want to use it, a couple times a day. If you're an elite athlete, using it for training purposes and recovery times, you may want to use it both before and after training. So it kind of depends on how what you're using it for. I myself use it more just for proactive health. So a 10-minute treatment time is sufficient for me. But yeah, it kind of largely depends on kind of what you're dealing with, and how you want to how you want to treat your body with these wavelengths of light.
Oh, I've seen some really cool stuff in the last year. You've got this thing in the hands of loads of UFC fighters,
Mhm.
NFL football players, professional baseball players. I mean, even um, I'm seeing so much penetration into the professional athletic realm with
Mhm.
this. What are some of the things that you guys have seen or heard from some of these high-end athletes that are using this device? I mean, Ben Greenfield was using it before, and he's a pretty high-level guy. He's not the level of some of these NFL players. I think TJ Dillashaw was talking about he uses the
Yep.
Juve. He's a UFC fighter. So what are you hearing from these athletes?
Yeah, I mean, there's a laundry list of kind of elite performance athletes, whether it's Olympic athletes or more traditional kind of professional sports. Um, everyone from Patrick Peterson, who's a multiple All Pro with the Arizona Cardinals, Keenan Allen, who's a All Pro wide receiver with the Chargers, T.J. Dillashaw, who holds the bantamweight title in the UFC. The list goes on and on. And what we've noticed is that um, elite athletes typically are pretty in tune with their bodies, especially those that are looking for kind of the next new therapy to help them perform better. Usually, those people, guys like Duncan Keith, who's three-time Stanley Cup champion with the Chicago Blackhawks. Those types of people are pretty in tune with their bodies, and so they tend to notice results with red light therapy very, very quickly. They'll notice very acute benefits. You don't have to necessarily be an elite athlete. That's probably one of the reasons you notice, Tristan, like results maybe sooner than others, is because you're very in tune with
Well,
how your body
I'm
functions.
not an elite athlete in any way, but I am pretty in tune with my body. But it's
Yeah.
like more from trying to get a broken vessel to work correctly. So I get really in tune with certain things, especially movement, chronic pain and inflammation and stuff like that. If I'm inside too much working on a computer, if I don't get outside in the sun, which it happens, I mean, I get days where I'm like,
Yep.
I'm computer bound, I'm frying my eyes on the dang blue light screen, which it destroys the retina when we're staring at these screens all the time, guys. So that's why I'm always telling everybody, get off the dang computer and go, get out in the real world and live your life. That's the message here. But sometimes I can't. Sometimes I gotta lay in front of that Juve, and 20 minutes in there can reset my body to where if I wasn't doing it, I might feel like my immune system was just tanking.
Yep. You know what's interesting about that too is this is a little bit off topic, but you mentioned like being in front of computer screens or devices all day. like I'm in the same boat, right? We run a kind of a virtual e-commerce company for the most part. I've got two big, basically three big monitors that I'm staring at. I recently picked up some daylight glasses that help block blue light during the day. So it's the glasses, you can't really tell that they're necessarily blocked. They're a little bit more of a clear lens, not the kind of the red lenses. But like I've noticed significant changes since introducing that into my daily routine, because when I don't wear those, it's like my eyes are super sensitive to like that bright artificial blue light, and I've got a lot of natural light coming in, like where in my workspace, and it's still, by wearing those daylight blockers, like I've noticed significant benefits. So I mean, if you're new to this whole thing, this concept of light, just introduce just like one of those concepts. So whether it's blue light blocking glasses at night, daytime blockers that help block blue light, picking up like, a small device like that Go to illuminate a room at night. Like I almost guarantee that you'll notice benefits with introducing any of those sort of modalities into your daily routine. I'm not the most like sensitive guy. I'm becoming more and more in tune with my body, but I would be very transparent and say I'm not nearly as kind of in tune as like my wife, as an example. But I personally notice the biggest benefits with kind of light therapy in general by wearing blue light blocking glasses at night, day blocking glasses during the day, and then using red light at night. And my sleep is a lot better when those things are on, sort of when I'm on it, when it comes to those three things. And kind of circling back to the elite athlete kind of conversation, that's probably the biggest area, or the most consistent area across the board with these elite athletes is, they'll notice faster muscle recovery, uh, they'll notice performance enhancement, but across the board, they all report better sleep. Like they're sleeping better, higher quality sleep.
Yeah.
Some of them are using diagnostic tools like Aura or something like that. It's more kind of qualitative in nature, but across the board, they'll notice much better sleep when introducing, red and near infrared light into their daily routine.
With our kids, it's night and day, right? So we used to have issues with our daughter with getting her to sleep when she was like 2 years old. She would very often just, the last fit of the day can be so hard to deal with. But man, we turn off all the lights. When the sun goes down, we don't turn on any, white light in the house now. We've got a few just cheap, normal hardware store LED red bulbs, which the flicker rate and stuff on those are not so good, but those help, just those alone. But then also, we'll throw the Juve on, and we'll kind of sit around as a family, say a prayer together as a family, and then they fall right asleep. The red light, my wife, she'll use the Juve Go to read a book to my daughter in bed sometimes, because Ariana likes to stay up as late as she can and try to suck as much time out of mama as she possibly can. She loves her mom. But it really works for getting those kids to just knock out at night. Much better. In the past, we used to have to give them whiskey and opioids. No, I'm kidding. No, but it really does. It knocks them out good.
I thought we were the only ones that introduced kind of that whiskey and opioid. Right?
People say that. People are like the old school. Some of these old. Some of the old boomers or the pre-boomers, they'll say you give the kid a little bit of whiskey on your finger or something, or puts them to sleep. We don't do that. I'm not recommending that, guys. But yeah, it does help.
You want me to talk about that study that was recently published about red light, the synergy between red light and whiskey?
Yeah,
right? Is that where we're going
exactly. Yeah, the sensitization to
One
alcohol.
shot of whiskey and red light, dramatically better sleep. No, I'm just kidding. That's not published. Maybe at some point in the future, but maybe we'll do a small pilot study there in Ecuador.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, it's every liquor bottle I've ever seen here. I don't really drink, but they're all plastic. They're all like the plastic liquor bottles. So the whiskey, it's probably like Old Crow or something that basically rebottled with a Spanish name. Piedra Viejo or something. But yeah, let's get into the immune system modulation effects of red light. I know there are some studies, and I think we might have got into this a little bit last time, but what sort of clinical research are we seeing connecting light exposure, especially red and near infrared light, to the immune system?
Right. Well, it all kind of sort of circles back to that core mechanism of action of helping the mitochondria in your cells produce more energy or just function better. And there's very clear evidence that these wavelengths of light actually help your body transition from what's called an M1 phenotype to an M2 phenotype. And what that means is that your lymphatic cells actually become more phagocytic. And so in essence, I kind of, the way I like to describe this is like everyone's familiar with like Pac-Man, right? The old school Pac-Man. In essence, that's what by transitioning your immune system to an M2 phenotype, your lymphatics, the cells in your lymphatic system actually act almost like Pac-Man, and they eat like that, foreign cells, toxic cells, those cells that need to, that we need to that need to die, that our body's trying to naturally get rid of. That's what happens when we're exposing our bodies consistently to red and near infrared light. And I would argue that's one of the core benefits of full body light therapy, is because you get that systemic effect by exposing more of your skin to these wavelengths of light. And our skin being the largest organ of our body, by exposing more of it, you do get that very systemic metabolic effect throughout your entire body.
Yeah, and I think this connects really well with the talk about light, electrical current, Dr. Gerald Pollack's fourth phase of water stuff. The collagen networks in our body are hydrating everything constantly. If you look at Scott, have you looked at some of those videos of the microscopic imagery of collagen networks and water moving along those collagen matrices?
Yeah,
It's just
yeah, it's super.
incredible, and the way
Yeah,
that it moves. So our skin is this massive network of liquid crystals that collagen is transporting water all throughout it. So if you're improving the electrical current that's flowing through there, it would make sense that that could affect systemically how everything communicates. So
right. And on that note, what's interesting is we reference Dr. Michael Hamlin quite a bit. He's on our scientific advisory board, but he is one of the, rightfully so, he's one of the leading researchers in the world of photobiomodulation. And he particularly likes the application of using these wavelengths of light directly on your skull or on your brain for the cognitive benefits. And it's clear that like these wavelengths of light will actually promote new signaling pathways in your brain, which I think is super interesting. But it speaks to that sort of those communication networks, and those are enhanced and often rebuilt through by consistent exposure to these wavelengths of light, which I think is super super interesting, especially if you're kind of operating under the core belief that our body, I mean our brain is our master regulator, for everything that goes on in our body. And if we can promote healthy signaling pathways, maybe in some cases new signaling pathways in our brain, that's across the board, we're going to see a whole host of health benefits.
no, mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of new mitochondria, that's connected with red light too, isn't it?
It is, yeah, definitely.
So
um
more
that's
mitochondria in the
definitely,
brain would mean a better functioning brain, right?
you got it, yep, no doubt.
Wow, wow. Now, I'm not sure how much time you have to hang out, but I got 1,000 other questions that I could ask you. Someone in the chat right now is just asking about the specific wavelengths. Like, what
Mhm.
frequencies, what wavelengths are we looking at with the device? Like, I've got the Juve Go, the red, and I've also got the Juve Duo over there, which is the near infrared red combo. What frequencies are we using here, and
Yep.
why these multiple frequencies? Why not just go to the hardware store and buy a red LED bulb? What's the difference?
Right. It's a good question. And if you're ready to take the next step and kind of pick up a light therapy device, you definitely want to make sure you understand which wavelengths of light it delivers. Going back in time to one of our core beliefs as a company when we were kind of developing our first devices, is we wanted to be transparent as possible when it comes to three things: which wavelengths they deliver, the power that's delivered from the devices, as well as like what that power looks like across a certain coverage area. So, kind of focusing in on that topic of wavelengths, I would first say that there are benefits to our bodies respond to different wavelengths of light, whether they're blue light, green light, orange light, red light, etc., or invisible near infrared light. But overwhelmingly, most of the research is focused on specific wavelengths of light in what's referred to as the optical or therapeutic window. More specifically, wavelengths in the mid 600 nanometer range, that's visible red light, and then wavelengths in the mid 800 nanometer range, which is invisible near infrared light. So we're talking about near infrared light, not mid or far infrared wavelengths that you find in a sauna, which is a different type of therapy. But it's near infrared light in the mid 800 nanometer range, and then red light in the mid 600 nanometer range.
And what's the difference between the near infrared and then the far infrared that you'd be seeing in a sauna? Because I've seen,
Yep.
I I do think that there are definitely benefits to these infrared saunas. I've never used
Yep.
one myself. There's loads of research. Some people say that they've tried them and that they sucked. They didn't feel anything from it. I've had a few people tell me I've tried this, the far infrared sauna, and it just seemed like crap. Like they didn't think to. They said a normal sauna was better.
Right.
So yeah, what's the difference between that sauna and what we're looking at here?
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's important to understand that they're two different therapies. It's kind of like comparing cardiovascular exercise versus weight training. Both beneficial, but very different as well. And so with saunas, there's definitely a fair amount of clinical data that supports the benefits of heat-based or sauna-based therapy. I would argue that there's way more science to support light therapy or photobiomodulation. But when it comes to saunas, you really want to look for, presuming yet you're interested in a dry sauna, you really want to look for one that delivers mostly mid and far infrared wavelengths, because those are the wavelengths that produce more heat, and that's what you want in a sauna is more heat. I'm gonna take a break here, 1 second. I was about due for a cough.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to
I
give
had a
the
time here.
audience something to critique there.
That's right.
Maybe I'll
That's
get my
right.
face real close to the camera. You guys can look for blemishes, and you got to
I'll,
count the
I'll
hairs
take
on my head, huh?
I'll take it. I'll take the criticism. But yeah, so that's the case with sauna. So you want to look for something, if you're looking into a dry sauna, mid and far infrared wavelengths, those produce more heat. Whereas with light therapy or photobiomodulation, you're not interested in a device that generates heat. Instead, these specific wavelength light, those in the mid red, or I'm sorry, in the visible red range, the mid 600 nanometer range, and the mid 800 nanometer range. So red and then near infrared light, those particular wavelengths have an affinity towards certain enzymes in our mitochondria, right? And we talked about the mechanisms, quite a bit here.
Hmm.
But those particular wavelength ranges have been, proven time and time again to for their ability to sort of excite the mitochondria in our cells. So definitely look for devices that deliver those two wavelengths of light. There are some LED based devices that do deliver blue light. There's a decent amount of research with respect to blue light, but primarily two things with blue light. One is for bacterial induced acne. Because of a blue light's ability to actually sort of kill that type of bacteria, and there's also evidence that suggests that blue light can help with pain as well. I would argue there's far more research with respect to red and near infrared light's ability to reduce pain, but there is some interesting science to support blue light's ability to do that. You just have to be cognizant of when you're using that blue light. You don't want to be using the blue light devices at night. That's going to disrupt your circadian rhythm.
Right.
If you're using it in the morning or during the day, probably not a big deal. But I would argue you always probably want to follow up with some red light. Blue light is very high energy type of wavelength, and whereas red and infrared is very restorative, and so it's always probably a good idea to use blue followed by red, or blue and red kind of combined together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a few people throwing in the comment there. Well, why not just get out in the sun? Like, why the heck would you ever use a device? Get out in the sun. Yeah, obviously you're never going to replace the sun. But
Right.
I mean, today, for instance, I got clouds outside, and even though I live at the equator, there's a big freaking difference between going out in that midday sun or the AM sunshine, which in the AM sun you can get a lot more red and near infrared for a longer period of time than you can in the midday when it's super intense. There's a big difference between cloudy days and a nice bright sunny day. In most places, especially in the US, you're seeing total coverage of cloud for a big portion of the year, and even on days when I mean, you're seeing a lot of blockage of the sun, is what I'll say, and that definitely will affect what you're receiving from the sun. But yeah, Scott, what about that? Why not just get out in the sun? Um,
Yep. I totally agree with you. Like if you're new to this concept of light, and maybe wanting to appreciate a little bit more for its health benefits, I would say step one is just get more natural sunlight exposure. Right? That doesn't cost you anything other than time maybe, but that would be step one. In fact, that's something that I personally we're here in Southern California, so we get a lot more of those sunny days. But that's something I try to do on a consistent basis every day, even if it's just 20 minutes. So yeah, there's no doubt this type of therapy does not replace, natural sunlight exposure. And I'm not talking about the natural sunlight exposure where, you stay inside all day and then go to the beach and get fried, on a Saturday afternoon. That's not great, obviously. I'm talking about more consistent natural sunlight exposure in shorter frequencies, 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day. But the reality is that if you really have an honest look at your lifestyle, most of us are busy and cannot afford either live in an area where there's not a lot of natural sunlight on a consistent basis, or our daily routines just don't afford us the flexibility to sit, go take off our shirt and go sunbathe for 20 or 30 minutes a day. I mean, I fortunately have the flexibility in my schedule to do that now, but when I was, in my corporate gigs in the medical device space, like, no, I'm not going to take off my business my business gear and go outside, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and try to attempt to get some natural sunlight. That just was not happening. So, this type of therapy, red and near infrared light therapy, it's another sort of, supplement to your daily routine.
Yeah.
Just like if you want to take a multivitamin or you're low on vitamin D, I would say get some more sunlight exposure, but you may want to take a vitamin D supplement. It's no different. It just allows you to get, a therapeutic dose of really healthy wavelengths in a short amount of time. When you kind of understand that most of us just don't have, live in a location or don't have the schedules to afford, daily, natural sunlight exposure.
Yeah, totally agreed. Yeah, I mean, one of the benefits of red light therapy that I've talked about a few times is and then I know Ben Greenfield soon after he started really talking about the benefits of this is red light opposed to the testicles. So I used to always tell people,
Yeah.
I mean, you want to improve your testosterone production, then go outside and rub the sun on your balls, right? Let that sun, get that sun on your testicles, and obviously you can't do that in public, right? If you got a backyard, it's very private. Some people can lay outside naked in the sun, but getting sunshine on your entire body, it's something that's very beneficial for health and for the production of testosterone. But I mean, you can't do that if you live in Minneapolis or if you live in most places in California. You will be arrested if you try and go outside and get some sunshine on your balls. So I've got a couple super chats here. Jay Dyer just says thanks. Jay, always bringing the great content on his channel. Make sure to check out Jay Dyer's YouTube channel. Good work over there, buddy. Hopefully see you tonight. Boiler Room. And then Toto Cult says, are LED light strips good? Is it's put on the red light setting? So LED light strips on the red light setting. What do you? I guess he's maybe talking about melatonin production and blue light exposure at night with LED light strips.
They could theoretically work. I mean, you want to probably pay attention to something you referred to, Tristan, earlier, is the flicker rate in those strips. As long as they're LEDs that aren't flickering and kind of disrupting your body in that fashion, they're probably okay. And that kind of falls into that more using these wavelengths of light for illumination at night. You're not really going to get any type of therapeutic dose of energy from like a strip like that, but theoretically, you could use it to illuminate a room at night, and you're much better off that way than than turning on sort of a bright white light.
Yeah, so I use this light for reading sometimes. I mean, this is it's a normal flashlight. It's just a little O-light flashlight that I don't know. Where's my camera? You guys, all right, you can see. A little O-light flashlight, and it's just got a red tip. So, reading with something like this is going to affect you much less than reading with this at night. This will keep you awake like this. This will let you sleep a little bit better. So simple plastic sheath for the end of your flashlight that you can buy on Amazon, or hopefully not from Amazon. Screw Amazon. But little changes like that, and sometimes even the computer that I'm using to stream right now, the graphics card had a blue LED thing, and I had to download a driver, and I was able to change it to red. Because I know sometimes I'll be using this machine at night and it'll be blasting that blue LED, and that would probably keep me awake much more than a red one. So, simple changes like that. But you won't get therapeutic effects from just a normal LED light strips.
Right. Yeah, there's no on that topic. Something to keep in mind too, if you're kind of digging into some different options, some red light therapy options, in terms of receiving that therapeutic dose, right? So there's the illumination kind of aspect at night, and then there's this other aspect of using something therapeutically. I will say that Some people fall under the guise that, and I'll just use my computer. It's a little bit maybe not the best representation, but if I presume my laptop in front of me is the device, that if I stand farther away from it, I want to be cognizant of you actually, the audience hearing me.
Yeah,
But
we could hear you.
if I stand farther away from it, I'll get this full body, this full body treatment the further I stand away from it. And the reality is that may look okay, like in a pretty illustration, but that actually doesn't work. You need to be very, very close to the device to receive a clinically relevant dose of energy. So much so that we've got some articles on our site about this, but so much so that if you add about 12 inches from any sort of high-powered device, the irradiance or total power output dramatically falls off the table at just 12 inches away. And so the size of the device and the coverage area really does matter, and you want to be cognizant of the fact that you just need to be close to it. I mean, ideally 3 to 6 inches away from the device, because at about a foot away, it just really falls off the table, and you're not really getting any sort of therapeutic dose at all.
There you go. So if you guys are doing blue light therapy, 3 inches away from your computer, you can just sit there and no, I'm kidding. Don't do that. Don't do that. Right? But I'm glad you said that, because it's a question I had, and I know we touched on this before. There's a Juve right up there. That's the first Juve we got, and we still use it all the time. But very often, I'll throw that thing on at night just to light up the whole house. And I'll put it really high up there, and we'll sit under the couch as a family, maybe read together and stuff like that, and or the dogs will lay under it. And sometimes the thing's on for hours, right? But it's very far away. Are there dangers to getting too much exposure to the Juve, the near infrared and red frequency? Is there a negative effect for having it on for too long?
At a certain distance like that, I would argue no, not really. You'd probably have to be under it literally all day to receive any sort of for the results to sort of diminish. And I would argue that you're not really going to get a negative response, but it's more like Pareto's law or law of diminishing returns, that after a certain period of time, there's just no additive benefits. Again, that kind of depends on how close you're standing to the device and what the dose that your body's actually receiving. That plays like a significant role in trying to determine at what point you'll reach that biphasic dose response. Mm-hmm. But again, I think the important point is that, the important point is to understand that there's not really a negative health consequences. It's just not additive. And so if you're interested in using red light therapy, in a sort of therapeutic way, doing really long sessions isn't probably the greatest idea. Instead, you should probably shorten those sessions and just do multiple treatments throughout the day. 2 or 3 treatments throughout the day, because at some point your body can't continue to metabolize that much light. In fact, that's one of the theories why pulsed light actually may be a little bit better than continuous wave light, is because with pulse light, you're actually giving your mitochondria almost like a break. Mm-hmm. There's a fair amount of evidence for the benefits of pulse light, and that's a completely different topic. But that is one of the theories in the world of photomedicine or photobiomodulation as to why pulse light might be a little bit better, is because of that. You're giving your cells almost a break in order to metabolize those wavelengths of light.
That's an interesting angle on it. So what about illuminating a house, right? So it's like if you were trying to optimize your space to kind of help you sleep, minimize artificial light or blue light exposure rather at night. Obviously the Juve, I mean, this is a therapeutic device that's very high powered, uses a lot of electricity. So when you're using a high powered device like this, obviously you're not going to want to have it on for hours, but do you have any advice for the audience on maybe, say we were going to light up an office or something, and you spend some time there in the evening doing some work, but you want to be able to sleep well at night and not be exposed to a bunch of crap blue light? What type of lighting might you recommend somebody use for non-therapeutic purposes, but to improve, health and sleep and whatnot?
Right. I mean, it probably depends on your budget, quite honestly. I mean, you could use like a smaller device like ours, like the mini device. in full train to be a little bit more expensive. You could use, the thing that you mentioned, like getting just almost like an infra a red kind of heat lamp or heat bulb from
Hmm.
a local department store, an incandescent heat bulb. That would be a decent option for illumination purposes. That's super cheap. I mean, it's going to cost you like $5. You could pick up more of like an ambient red light a device, just like you said earlier, Tristan, making sure that it doesn't flicker if it's LED
Hmm.
based. That's an option. The Philips Hue system, that's kind of a cool option. I haven't ever looked into the flicker rate for the Philips Hue system. I can't speak to that in an informative way, but that's a kind of a cool system. That's a little bit more pricey, but it does, it's kind of a nice gadget to be able to control the Kelvin or the color temperature
Hmm.
of your lights throughout the day. I think that's a kind of a cool option. So like in the morning, you can adjust to a little bit more high Kelvin to sort of mimic the sunrise or the daytime sun, and then as the evening approaches, especially during the winter months, you can turn down the Kelvin temperature on those lights, so it represents more of like a natural sunset, which I think is cool. So yeah, those are some options. Kind of depends on your budget. The cheapest option would be pick up a cheap infrared heat lamp to illuminate a room if you want an incandescent heat lamp if you want to if you're on a tight budget. That's probably the
That's
cheapest.
interesting. So like a reptile light.
Yep, you got it. You got it. Yep, that would be
Don't a lot of those have like combined frequencies though? Don't they sometimes like a lot of those have blue and red or
yeah, like a grow like a plant grow light or a reptile light. Yeah, those actually definitely they're a little bit more full spectrum. I'm
mm,
more referring to like a heat lamp that you pick up at like a Home Depot or a
okay.
Lowe's, two large department stores, hardware department stores here in the U.S.
Hmm.
Those deliver a much more narrow spectrum, usually in the range of kind of 600 to about 1400 nanometers. So
Hmm.
you're not really going to. I mean, again, you're not going to get any sort of therapeutic dose of energy from a cheap infrared heat lamp like that. They're also really inefficient because they produce a fair amount of heat,
Yeah.
unnecessary heat. But those wavelengths are much better at night than a bright white
Yeah, if you're just using
LED.
it for a few hours, maybe not so bad. Or I mean, if
Yep,
you have a cold home, if you live in a cold area, and could maybe warm it up a little bit.
you
Um,
got it.
cool, cool, really good advice there. Scott, I guess maybe we should start wrapping it up here. If you guys have super chats in the audience, we can answer some of those, but I'm not seeing any right now. Um, so we've got as far as what Juve has out right now. It seems like the modular setup is kind of the way that you guys have gone. Right in the past, you had that huge device, the Juve Max, which was
Yep.
like 3 or 4 times the size of the one you guys see behind me. But now what you guys are working with is this modular setup. So we've got the Juve Duo right here, which is just awesome. The Juve Duo, there's basically 2 units that you can chain together and you can control them with one button. You can even use like I think they have a Bluetooth thing, but I turn the Bluetooth off because we prefer keep the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth out here. But yeah, what's up with the new units? What's up with the new design? What sort of changes have you guys made recently on these new devices?
Yeah, I mean, we launched a kind of a completely refreshed version of our core light therapy devices last August. So we're recording this in early April in 2019. This was August of 2018, and I like to say we went from a BlackBerry to an iPhone 7. We're still making improvements, so we're not like iPhone 10 or anything like that. But we did make some significant changes to our devices. There's a fair amount of tech built into the devices now. If you're kind of more of a tech gadget guy, you can also turn that off, like you said, Tristan, and just use a hardwire pairing kit and turn off Bluetooth and Wi-Fi capabilities. But there's a fair amount of tech. But like the big core difference is that modular design, like you mentioned. And what I mean by that is our core thesis as a company is we want everyone to have easy and convenient access to full body light therapy. And so what this modular system allows you to do is similar to Lego blocks. You can start out with one kind of panel, and then over time you can build out a much bigger full body system. And those devices connect together physically, but also electronically as well. So if you started out with what we call the solo device, which is similar in size to the old the legacy device that's hanging behind you, Tristan.
Mm-hmm.
If you can start out with the solo and then build out to what we call the elite, which is 6 solo devices. And then what that ends up looking like is it's a big, huge kind of panel. It's a little over 6 feet tall, about 3 feet wide. And because of that unique because of that unique modular connection system, one device controls the whole system. So it's not like you have to turn on every single device. It's just one click of a button and the whole thing lights up. And that's really the unique thing about that modular design. Whereas, other light therapy devices, it's kind of one and done. You can't connect them together or build out a full body system over time. With our devices, you can easily do that. And so that's probably the biggest core difference. Is that modular concept. There's a bunch of other tech, built in that you can turn on or off. I do think the way we've designed our power cords on our devices, as well as the shielded LED drivers, does really mitigate EMFs a lot. If you're concerned about that, we have a proprietary way that we design the power cords, and then we're using aluminum shielded LED drivers to really help mitigate EMFs. The LEDs on our devices are electrostatic coated. In essence, what that means is you prevent the mirroring effect that happens with most LED devices, so you get a more concentrated dose of energy. So yeah, there's some ancillary, there's a kind of a laundry list of ancillary benefits, but that core kind of modular design is the biggest difference.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
you guys can find more if you guys want to look more into the red light therapy, into what we're talking about. You can check out. There's going to be a link in the description right down below on this YouTube video. And so yeah, Scott, I really appreciate you coming on, man. I'm loving the Juve Mini, or the Juve Go Red. I keep calling it the Mini. The Juve Mini is like 4 times the size of this thing, and the Juve Mini has both frequencies, right?
Yeah. Our modular devices, those ones that kind of connect together, those deliver both red and near infrared light, which you can control. You can turn on or off those wavelengths using the built-in control on each device or our app. But the handheld device that you referenced, Tristan, that is that's not modular. That's like handheld and portable. It's completely wireless and rechargeable. That's either red or near infrared. So like the one that you they're delivering all red wavelengths at 660 nanometers, and then we've got an all near infrared version as well in that Juve Go. So kind of a cool device, pretty affordable. Delivers the same actually power and therapeutic dose of energy as our larger systems. It's just smaller.
Yeah.
But pretty convenient. A way to use light therapy, whether it's different rooms in your home or if you travel a lot. It's a pretty cool little device.
It's pretty amazing. I think some people are asking, like, can you look into it? Yeah, I'd use this thing for my eyes, actually, because when I'm on a computer, and if there's not a lot of sunshine outside, which, like I said, even today, it's pretty dang cloudy. We've had about 3 days of intense rain. Hopefully it clears up and get some sunshine today. But I feel an effect from being on devices, being on a computer. I feel the effects of it, and I feel this thing. It does the opposite of what the computer screen does to my eyes. I can feel it loosening it up and kind of relaxing all the musculature all around the eyes there. It just feels great. So I've got one more super chat question here. Someone says, can you use near infrared to heal the gut? Also, can you look into the red light, or do you need protective glasses when doing so? So I just answered the can you look into it? Yeah, I look into it for therapeutic effects, and you get a huge after image afterwards for a few seconds, and but it really is awesome. Now, what about the question on can you use near infrared to help heal the gut?
Yeah, and I kind of hinted at this earlier. There's not like a lot of specific peer-reviewed science yet that speaks to these particular wavelengths of light having a direct correlation on gut health, but there is a group of researchers out of Sydney, Australia, that have recently published some cool research on using near-infrared wavelengths, and they've shown that actually those wavelengths of light have a one-to-one correlation with helping your gut produce more healthy microbiome. And so I think that's super interesting. And I think we'll probably continue to learn more and more about the relation to these wavelengths of light and overall, gut health. So I'd say it's early research, but definitely promising. And really to kind of add on to the other your other answer, Tristan, about like looking into these directly into these devices without eyewear. Our devices are registered with FDA as Class 2 medical devices, and I know probably most most people that are listening don't really care about FDA. But really what that means is that as a manufacturer, you have to, because of the regulation that's around that, you have to do a whole host of different safety testing. One of those being photobiological safety testing for your eyes. And our devices have obviously passed that testing. And above and beyond that, there's a lot of evidence that suggests um, uh, 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 a decrease in macular degeneration, enhanced vision with using or looking into red and near infrared wavelengths of light. So it's something that we usually recommend as long as you can handle the brightness. We generally recommend not using eyewear because if it's actually beneficial for your eyes.
Yeah, no, I can feel it. I definitely feel the effects on my eyes. It makes my eyes feel great. Um, cool. So, yeah, man. So you've got the Juve devices with the 660 nanometer and 810 nanometer wavelengths, and the little mini device is really cool. I think the near infrared could be interesting for like traveling. You know, if I had
Mm-hmm.
a near infrared one and the tiny one would be cool for travel. You know, if you're in a car for a long period of time or something like that, that could be really cool. Or I guess if you use the Juve Mini, which is bigger than this one, you know, if I was traveling, I'd probably bring a Juve Mini and maybe have an adapter to where I could use it in the vehicle. Um, is the
That's a good
Juve
idea.
Mini, does it plug into a wall, or is that battery powered?
The mini our modular devices for the mini and solo, those are you can't those are not battery powered, so you have to actually plug them in.
So you need
The
an
Juve
adapter. Do you have an adapter for the Mini for like a car?
Yeah, for a car. That's
It'd be
we
kind of
don't
dangerous
include.
because some people with that red light, they could get stupid with it.
Yeah,
But
it's funny
for
though.
the
We've seen
near
people
infrared,
like driving with our, the devices like on their neck or something like that. It's pretty interesting. We don't include a car adapter. We include different power cords for different countries for sure, but
yeah,
not an adapter for our vehicle. But that's kind of the cool thing about the Go is that it's wireless and rechargeable, so it's super easy to use in a car.
yeah, yeah. It's just it's always the bigger the better with the red light therapy devices, right? You know, when I first bought the little one back there, you call it the legacy device now, but the original Juve. As soon as I received it, I was like, damn, I should have bought the super big one. I should have bought the Juve Max. That's what, but yeah, it's been really nice talking, Scott. Thanks for coming on. It's always a pleasure learning from you and learning about red light and the effects of light, the therapeutic effects of light. You know, I mean, it's not just vitamin D production. When you go out in the full spectrum sunlight, you're also getting all these frequencies that we talked about, the 660, 810 nanometer range. When you go outside in that full spectrum sun, you're getting that full heliotherapy they used to call it. You're getting the red, the near infrared, the UVA, UVB. You're getting all these frequencies, and but hey, we all can't get out in the sun all the time. So it's definitely been a real pleasure talking, and it's been a real pleasure using your devices in our home for the last shoot. I mean, it's been maybe almost 2 years now. I think I'm not sure how long we've been using them, but I've seen massive improvements in my own recovery, and I really enjoy using them. Something I think I told you this in our last podcast, and I'll drop this anecdote, and then we'll sign out. But my dog, he was dying about a year ago. We thought he was definitely going to die. We dug a hole out in the backyard. We were ready to bury him, and he was losing a lot of weight, and it just seemed like maybe he had a couple weeks left. We started putting him underneath the Juve, and all the tumors in his mouth disappeared.
Hmm.
He started eating again. He gained weight, and he lived for at least almost a year after that. He lived for about 9 to 10 months, I think, after that, and he had a real nice, easy death. And yeah, but I definitely saw immediate dramatic effects after about a week of the Juve use. Tumors went away in his mouth, started gaining weight and eating again, started barking at things outside and doing his usual games. And he maybe got 9 to 10 months after that he lived. Now I'm not sure if it's just from the Juve and the red light therapy, but it definitely seemed to correlate with that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, I do remember you sharing that story, and it's amazing the affinity that animals and we notice it more just because we have a dog, but that they have for red light. It's like they gravitate towards it. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean these benefits definitely apply to
Look,
animals
they're
as
back
well.
there waiting for it to get turned on.
There they are.
Spoiled ass dogs. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, they love the red light therapy. So, yeah, Scott. Yeah, any last thoughts before we drop off here?
No. I just say if you're new to this kind of this topic of light, just try to be, step one, just get some more natural sunlight in your daily routine. That's probably step one. And then, if you're ready to take the next step and invest in a light therapy device, just look for wavelengths, power, and size, and ideally that power metric has been confirmed by independent sort of analysis, as well. So just make sure you're looking out for those key things, make an informed decision, and I think if you use it consistently, I have little doubt that you'll receive all, a wide variety of the benefits that we're talking about.
Right on. All right. So you guys can find more, learn a little bit more about red light therapy. There will be a link down in the description of this YouTube video if you're watching it on YouTube. And so yeah, guys, get off the computer, go outside, go get in that real full spectrum sunlight, and get rid of your dang Facebook account, get off the social media, make real communities, and go live your lives, guys. Peace.